joining us on this season of The Great British Mystery Writer. Thousands of people applied and only 6 got through. Over the next 4 weeks, their writing will be scrutinized no matter their experience. Judges Agatha Christie and John Grisham have designed a brand new challenge for our contestants. Inspired by Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, this is The Great British Mystery Writer. There are typically 2 parts to a Sherlock Holmes mystery. The second part is optional, but the ingredients these writers will need are not. They'll start with our dynamic duo, Sherlock Holmes, who is obviously of superior intellect, and his right-hand man, Dr. John Watson. Then they must decide how to incorporate the following elements.
A middle-class villain.
The token female character, always at the mercy of men.
A band of helpful street kids.
A clue that's either misinterpreted or unclear.
At least one cab.
You need a ride?
A missing object.
Nature. Could be beautiful.
Could be scary.
A large house. Could be beautiful.
Probably scary.
A guy with a scary face could be dead or alive.
Sherlock Holmes? In disguise. The dimming of lights at some point. Once they've gathered their ingredients, they can start following the recipe. It may seem straightforward, but one small misstep or one unclear connection and the entire story falls apart. Let's take a look at the process.
The judges recommend that the contestants start off with both Holmes and Watson at 221B Baker Street. Holmes is playing his violin, smoking, or doing drugs because he is incredibly bored. He needs intellectual stimulation in order to keep from going insane. Watson is doing something normal. Then they are interrupted by a letter. Someone needs their assistance. After reading the letter, Holmes can tell precisely who needs their help and gives a perfect description to Watson. Inevitably, he sees them out the window. Watson is skeptical as usual, but as usual, he is proven wrong. Holmes has perfectly described their visitor down to the shades, the crystal necklace, and the I Love Public Schools mug. The visitor then proceeds to explain this baffling mystery. Most of the time it's murder, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. In this case, it's murder. To the scene of the crime, Holmes declares, as he and Watson travel to the crime scene to gather as much valuable information as possible. A murder. Holmes uses his incredible powers of deduction to gather clues. Inevitably, members of local law enforcement arrive and mess everything up. They are typically bumbling and incompetent idiots. Fortunately, Sherlock Holmes has gathered all the information he needs and is hot on the case. He and Watson follow the trail of evidence. Sometimes they get off track. but they always find their way back. As the resolution draws near, Holmes has made his deductions. He is fairly confident that he has solved the case, though it is his personal philosophy to never share his findings until he is absolutely sure. At this point, typically, they need to wait for someone or for something to happen so that Holmes can capture the perpetrator. Then the villain! After a brief pursuit, Holmes apprehends the bad guy. He has saved the day. But how did you do it? Now this part of the recipe is absolutely vital. We must have an explanation of how Holmes solved this crime, for the benefit of Watson, sometimes the law enforcement, and of course for the audience. Now the writers do have the option to include a part 2. At the beginning of part 2, we see an unknown male character. There is also probably a woman, a damsel in distress, and her father.
We come across a band of murderous villains.
We learned that the unknown character is actually the murderer from part 1. However, he is sort of the triumphant good guy of part 2. The reader feels morally conflicted. I feel morally conflicted. After the events unfold, we come back to present time where connections are made and questions are answered. Despite doing nothing, the cops get all the credit, and Sherlock does drugs.
So there you have it. The writers have all the ingredients they need to create a successful Sherlock Holmes story. The question is, who can pull it off, and who will pack their bags and go home? Tune in next week to find out. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Great British Mystery Writer.